But this was always an odd fit for a federal case. Okay, so when you're talking about RICO, RICO is designed to go after corrupt organizations like the mafia, criminal enterprises that are essentially ongoing conspiracies. And Bad Boy Records was a legitimate, musical enterprise. It wasn't, it didn't really fit. And that's one of the fundamental elements of that. And I think the prosecution did a pretty darn good job of explaining that, but they did so in a very, they have to, as they go through the law, kind of a stiff, professorial, kind of wonky, legalese way to say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, these are the reasons why it fits. And then a lot of the crimes they listed as what are known as predicate acts in order to satisfy RICO. So that's where, like the arson and things like that. What we saw in that video should have been prosecuted as a state crime. And it should have been prosecuted. So should the arson have been prosecuted. So it was a very difficult federal case. I tip my hat to the effort on that. But it wasn't a good fit. Sex trafficking also was all the consensual elements of that were always going to be a problem. And the jury convicted him, as I think they should have, of the Mann Act violations. But the Mann Act it's a morality crime. It was enacted around the turn of the last century, so 125 years ago, and it was essentially a way for them to go after pimps that were transporting prostitutes across state lines back when we used to call them prostitutes. Right now we call them sex
Right.
workers. But I had a friend of mine who put it very simply. He said, every lonely divorced guy in New York City who engages the services of a sex worker and pays for her Uber to come across that bridge or through one of those tunnels is committing a Mann Act violation because they are facilitating the transportation of a sex worker across state lines. And that's what it takes. So the jury convicted him of that. I would be surprised if he gets a whole lot of time for that, frankly, because it is a morality crime and he was acquitted of the most serious crimes. So, I
I don't
really, I'm
think he'll get a lot of
hesitant.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't think
Yeah,
he
I
will
don't
either.
think he's